That baffles medical science. It's the disorder autism. Autistics seem to be trapped in their own world, and they often suffer from a hypersensitivity to sound. Well, now researchers are experimenting with a new treatment, quite unusual, and they're not even sure how it works. But so far, it does show promise. And what happens is this. Patients hear audio tapes through headphones, and then those sounds that cause pain are filtered out. And over time, the patient's hearing seems to modify itself. It's a fascinating process that could benefit many of the estimated 350,000 Americans who are autistic. And it all began with the experience of a young woman named Georgiana Stelly Thomas.
I remember going on a trip once. It was a 3-hour drive up to the country, and there was this one girl sitting next to me. And I was sitting in the middle, and she was having a conversation with people in the car. And I could not, her voice was driving me crazy. I just wound up crawling up and going into a corner and covering my ears.
Imagine hearing so well that common sounds are unbearable. Voices, everyday noise. The world could easily be a terrifying place, causing you to withdraw, paralyzed with fear. Researchers believe that 40% of autistic people have this bionic hearing, which makes them retreat from life. The Wells family from the San Diego area are on a journey to Portland, Oregon, where their 9-year-old son, Jacob, will be part of one of the first studies of auditory training in this country.
I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what it's going to take for Jacob to make it.
Dad, I saw 2 Dalmatians.
Jacob was autistic from birth. He has benefited from many treatments and therapies. Outwardly, he appears to be a normal 9-year-old, but he is still having problems.
He just acted like a child who was in pain, and in pain all over.
We thought that there was either a hearing problem or something else was amiss.
I've had teachers treat him poorly because he does seem like he should be normal.
He'd go off into another place and separate himself from what was going on.
Every night you constantly are going over, what did I do? You feel that you had to have done something to create what he's going through.
But could Jacob simply be trying to escape the everyday noise which he finds painful? His hearing may hold the key to his recovery from autism. The first stage of this new treatment involves testing Jacob's hearing to identify which high and low sounds cause discomfort. Every patient has different sensitivities, so the researchers make a graph which shows the range of hearing.
8. I turned it off, Jacob. I got it off. Whew. I know that must have hurt. Okay, I'm going to give you one more. This is 9. Okay, thanks, Jacob. You really worked hard.
Dr. Bernard Rimland is the country's foremost expert on autism.
The audiogram of a person who has hypersensitive hearing looks like a mountain range, and there's a lot of high peaks. And if a person has a high peak at a certain point in his hearing, any noise at that sound frequency will be very painful to that person.
By the hearing patterns so that all sounds will be perceived at similar levels.
Lives on from the Chippewa on down at the big lake they call Gitchagumi.
Jacob, Jr., and the other 200 patients in the study begin the actual auditory training. First, the hearing frequencies, which were identified as being hyperacute, are filtered out of the music played through this machine into headphones. Listen to this. Lightfoot's The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, after being filtered through the auditory training machine.
The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down at the big lake they call Gitchagumi.
In addition, the music is altered randomly between high and low volume.
What he hears the rest of the music with the absence of the sounds that are causing the most discomfort.
The auditory training lasts a half hour twice a day for 10 days. And incredibly, after that short period, the hearing has adjusted to normal levels permanently.
And so his ear gets acclimatized to hearing sounds that are not painful, and that causes the muscle in the ear to relax, become less painful, and that the hearing becomes more normalized.
I think I begin to understand this now, that by taking the pain out of hearing in this training, they begin to make a connection with reality that they can expand on.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That they don't really understand how auditory training works. One theory is that it helps that it helps remedy a common problem autistic people have, and that is an inability to change attention from one thing to another easily. And so the random shifting of loud to soft in volume and the changing frequencies used in the training may be a sort of mental aerobic workout that helps the mind sharpen its ability to change focus. Annecy, a village in the French Alps. Here, Dr. Guy Berard developed auditory training to remedy his own loss of hearing. He later used it to successfully treat dyslexia. When Georgie Stelly was brought over from America, he attempted to treat her autism, and it worked.
Because there is a 9-hour
We brought Georgie back to Annecy for their first meeting since Dr. Berard treated her as a child.
Do you remember the treatment you had here?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
With that bad music?
Georgie had been diagnosed severely autistic with no chance of recovery. Once withdrawn, unreachable in her own private world, she is now able to provide a unique view into the world of the autistic.
I never even really communicated about my fear of certain sounds because I thought everybody else heard the same way and that I wasn't handling it as well. I remember waking up to the sound of blood rushing through my head, and that always scared me because I didn't really know what it was at the time.
Annabelle Stelly, Georgie's mother, saw a remarkable change come over her daughter.
It was 6 o'clock at night, the second day after her auditory training sessions had ended, which had taken 10 days. And Georgie said, "May I go out and play?" And my husband and I looked at her and looked at each other and said, "What do you want to do that for? It's dark and it's raining and supper's almost ready." And she said, "Because the rain doesn't sound like a machine gun anymore."
I was almost ashamed that I'd let something like that get in the way, but I couldn't help it. I mean, I couldn't understand why it scared me so much.
That rain had sounded like a machine gun to her.
And we let her go, and she danced all around the courtyard with her arms stretched out.
You hear something?
Yes. Yes.
Berard is testing Georgie's hearing again to see if the treatment done 15 years ago has permanently changed her hearing patterns.
Your hearing is perfect. 99% perfect on both ears.
I have a chance to really do something with my life, to make friends, go to school, and just have fun, you know, which is what I'd been wanting to do all along. So I just felt like I was getting my reward.
Today on Life Choices. A French doctor uses a music machine to work medical miracles.
For the first time in my life, I wanted to get to know other people. I wanted to know more about the world.
Most of us had never heard of this disorder until we watched Dustin Hoffman in the film Rain Man. The condition is autism. It's a mysterious malady that affects hundreds of thousands of people. People with autism are living in an often frightening world, a world in which they see many things very differently than you and I. No one has been able to cure this brain disorder, but a remarkable French doctor seems to have made a startling breakthrough. Our cover story begins in Albuquerque.
Their brain is impaired in such a way that they really can't make much sense out of the world. They can't make much sense of what people do or what people say.
The fact that autism is so little understood has led many parents to seek out a diagnosis and cure on their own.
My faith had a lot to going.
Annabelle Staley had two daughters who were born seriously ill. Dotsie died of leukemia. 26-year-old Georgie is autistic.
I knew when she was a month old and hadn't smiled or held my finger or snuggled in any way. You know, there was just no relationship possible with this baby because there was nothing coming back from her.
I remember being afraid of the ocean, not being able to go anywhere near it because it sounded like a tidal wave. And I remember people's voices bothering me so much that I didn't feel like I could get near them without wanting to scream.
And another thing she couldn't do was blow out candles on a birthday cake. She couldn't stand any kind of blowing sound.
But Annabelle always held out hope that one day Georgie could be cured of her autism. Annabelle's second husband, Peter, helped preserve that dream.
Well, that's why I kept saying to her, I know you're a good mother. You adore this kid, so it has nothing to do with how we act with the child. It's not the environment.
Whether the Staleys found a cure-all for autism is debatable. What is clear, however, is that young Georgie came out of her autistic shell after just 1 week with this man.
Yes.
That's fine.
Dr. Guy Berard, age 75, is a native of France with a long and illustrious career in medicine. He, too, had fought a personal battle. A fellow doctor once diagnosed him with progressive deafness.
Ask him, what should I do? He told me nothing. You are half deaf. In 5 years, you will be completely deaf, and that's all. No treatment, no treatment.
Dr. Berard decided to treat himself with music and a set of headphones. Operating on the theory that the ear's tiny muscles needed exercise, Dr. Berard commissioned a device that rapidly changes the frequencies of ordinary music from high to low and back again. So music that sounds like this on your home stereo sounds like this in Dr. Berard's office.
Low frequency, high frequency, low frequency, high frequency.
We're simply exercising the muscles of the ear in a certain way so that they loosened up.
Dr. Berard called his method auditory training. He used it not only to cure his own deafness, he says, but to treat dyslexia, a reading disorder. The Staleys learned of Berard's ideas and persuaded him to work with Georgie. For 10 days straight, young Georgie spent an hour a day in treatment.
The first few days were very uncomfortable. Like the first 3 or 4 days were a struggle for me to keep the headphones on.
But already, something wonderful was happening. Before the 10 days of auditory training, Georgie's hearing graph looked like this, jagged with peaks and valleys showing where her hearing was causing intense pain. After the therapy, her graph looked more like this. In less than 2 weeks, Dr. Berard had given Georgie Staley virtually normal hearing, and apparently much more. Mysteriously, but undeniably, many symptoms of Georgie's autism began to melt away.
For the first time in my life, I wanted to get to know other people. I wanted to know more about the world. I became much more sociable. I wanted to make friends.
There are a lot of cases around, and also one research study, which does indicate auditory training to be quite useful. At the same time, the research is not sufficient to be able to say conclusively that it's useful.
Today, Georgie Staley is still challenged by some symptoms of autism, but she's married, lives in Oregon, and graduated from college with academic honors. Georgie credits Dr. Berard's treatment with alleviating the hypersensitivity to noise that made her withdraw from so much.
To me, he's a hero. I love the guy. I think he's great. I think he's a genius.
The day after the auditory training was finished, it was raining, and Georgie came into the room and said, "May I go out and play?" She was 11 and a half. She'd never asked if she could go out and play. And then we looked at each other, Peter and I, and said, "Well, what do you want to go out for? It's dark and it's raining." And she said, "Because the rain doesn't sound like a machine gun anymore." I remember her first birthday party after auditory training when she was 12, and what a pleasure it was to bring in a cake loaded with candles and have Georgie blow them all out, happily.
Well, just recently, 200 people with autism received auditory training. They'll be monitored closely in the coming months to see how well Dr. Berard's musical medicine really works. And by the way, Georgie, that's the woman you just met, she now works for the Center for the Study of Autism in Oregon.
All of the countries named, which is a pretty phenomenal feat since Africa is not.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's important. Can we find out about
You've gotten married? Yeah, I'm married now.
Would you like
I just
to
had
tell
my
me
first
about that?
anniversary.